Hi, everyone. Welcome to A New View. I'm Lee, and I'm here with Kim, Shira, and Juji. We are four friends, speakers, and professionals from different cultures, backgrounds, and age groups coming together to offer healing and inspiration. Today, we're going to be talking about creating a space for people to speak openly without judgment. Who wants to go first?
Me first.
Okay, you.
I was actually with a friend yesterday, and she's also a coach. So we were talking about, working with people, and she said something to me that was just so beautiful. And she said, the biggest gift that you can give somebody is making them feel safe to be around you. And that is so wonderfully true. And yet it's so challenging sometimes to really come from a place of non-judgment, because people need to talk. Like, they literally just need to talk about things. And a lot of the time they're not looking for your feedback. A lot of the time you're just there to be a sounding board for them. And of course they want some sort of like sign of life that you are listening. But not to make it about yourself. There is a time and a place to say like, oh, that sounds hard. Hey, I went through something similar, like so, or like, oh, I have seen how this goes for other people and I understand what you mean. And there's just something very intimate about that connection that can be formed when somebody is authentically sharing and feeling safe to do so. It comes out very differently. It comes from a place of vulnerability instead of like complaining or finger pointing or blaming. It gives people the opportunity to self-reflect in a way that they might not have been able to if they were trying to like put up a front for the person that they're talking to. Because sometimes when you speak your truth, and you can start to sort of reconfigure it in your mind in a way that you're like, oh, wait, I thought I knew what that was all about, but I'm starting to see like, my role in it or something like that. And then they can share that without feeling that judgment coming from someone else.
Yeah, I think one of the phrases that I love to use when I'm talking to somebody and they're sharing, when you say, tell me more about that, right?
Mm-hmm.
That sort of like invites them to share. If, and I always caveat it with, if you're comfortable with it or if you'd like to, but, inviting people in, it just, because a lot of times when you're talking to somebody, they don't know if they can, unless they're a really close friend, whether they can trust you or not. And I recently had an interesting experience with someone that I reconnected with after many years. In fact, we knew each other in childhood, and then we reconnected recently. And she's like, bring me up to speed. Like, what's been happening in your life? And I was like, just telling her some of the things, and, left the marriage and I'm in a new relationship and I feel so much healthier and yada, yada, yada. And right after I finished, there was like this pause. And because I've never really been that vulnerable, as we've discussed in other episodes, like I just sort of, didn't really share all that much. I kind of like hid in shame and didn't really want to, open up the Pandora's box, but I just felt so free. I'm like, yep, this happened and that happened. And then there was this pause, and all of a sudden she was like, wow, I know we haven't spoken in so long, but I'm going through this thing now that sounds kind of similar to what you went through. And we ended up being on the phone for 2 hours. And she was like, I was meant to talk to you right now. And thank you so much for listening and giving me some advice. And it was just so, it just felt like I was helping the person because I was sharing my own stuff. And then that gave her permission to share her stuff. And then that's why we're here. I say it all the time, but that's why we're here, to help each
Yeah.
other.
I feel like that's great. Sometimes, yes, when we share, it allows other people to start sharing and hopefully feeling safe enough to do so. But there's also a lot to be said for just being a good listener, and if you are able to be a good listener and allow the person to speak. So I've been in those, well, I've tried to be in both, I've been in both shoes, but for me being the one to speak, and if I am in front of somebody who is just listening and literally just doing that, sometimes, there is that craving for them to say something and jump in or kind of like sugarcoat or whatever it is that we are seeking. But it's so much better for us when the person listening is just listening, because I have found that in many cases, sometimes you kind of solve or you answer your own questions, or you come to some conclusions about whatever it is that you're talking about, because it's really the first time that you're hearing yourself think it out without any interruption. Or talk it out. Talk your thoughts without any interruption really can get you to a place of a breakthrough.
And also when you're sharing with another person or multiple people, you're not sitting alone, just thinking about it, and your chatter in your mind is creating all these stories and all this meaning, where when you're actually speaking it aloud in front of other people, I feel like there's such a big difference there. It's way more effective to actually be saying it. Shira and I, Shira is a part of ACA, and I haven't gone in a while, but I love it. It's amazing ACA meetings for anyone who has any dysfunction, that went on in their family. It's very healing. But
You mean everybody?
Everybody, pretty much, yeah. But it's this huge group of women, and the few times I went with Shira in person, there was like 25 women around the table, and they give you, someone has the timer and they give you 3 minutes. There's a whole method, you write for a little bit, and then there's a talking portion, and somebody holds a timer and you get 3 minutes to speak. And so there's, stuff coming up in you about your childhood or triggers or issues you're going through from just even the writing portion. And you just say whatever you want for 3 minutes straight. And then the timer goes off, and that's your cue to stop. And no one says anything. No one is allowed to speak. But you're sitting there in a table of 20 or more women. It's the most healing thing ever. It's like healing in such subconscious ways. And I think actually that those meetings made me really see the power of feeling heard. I mean, I've felt heard many times in my life, but when it's in silence and you just have to, you speak and then you sit with what you've said, and it's just out there now, out of your body. It's not stuck in there now like poison. It's not gonna, it's so powerful and healing. I mean, I really, really feel deeply about the psoriasis on my skin being thoughts and energy and emotions that just need to get the frig out of my body. It's like for so much of my life, I repressed anger. It's so uncomfortable for me to feel anger, and I repressed it for so long. And I believe the psoriasis is a huge portion of anger, just like trying to escape and get out. Like our thoughts and energy really it'll manifest if you keep it in. So it gives us an opportunity to help people express and like let it out.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like there's something so powerful about other people being a witness to your pain. Like we're all just having this experience of life, and it's okay that nobody has anything to add to that, you know. I remember that part of Landmark too, is when we would like turn to our partner and it would say, like, not even a partner, like turn to a stranger next to you and say something about something, and the person is supposed to listen, add nothing. Listen, add nothing.
Very powerful.
Oh my God, it was like impossible for some people though. It was just like, but you should do this. You know? That's actually an interesting thing, because I thought about the absurdity of advice of a while ago. Like, logistically, we can give advice to people, but like life advice, that's tricky, because we are all so different. We're all made so differently, and we're all having such a different experience of life. Like, one person's divorce is not another person's divorce. One person's, you know, childhood trauma with, you know, parents who are substance abusers is not another's. So it's our interpretation. Like, Shira, you're a twin, right? You have a person who is so genetically close to you, and yet you've had a totally different life, a
Yep.
totally different experience of what your family was, of who you ended up being with, the children that you've had. I mean, it's like two more people could not be more genetically linked and yet have such a different view of things. So to try and like give advice to somebody not even in your family, or somebody who you haven't grown up with, or any of these, like, it doesn't matter. Everybody is having a different experience of life. And the idea of trying to like tell them what to do about that just seems so like absurd to me for some reason, because we all have an inner compass. We all have something inside of us that helps us decide what is best for us. That has nothing to do with anyone else's opinion.
Well, it's funny you're saying that on the heels of, just on the heels of what Kim was saying about ACA, because one of the tenets of ACA is we learn to take more responsibility in our own lives instead of giving advice to others, because there's codependency in that giving advice to other thing. But, you know, I always think, like, if someone says to me, well, if I were you, I would, and I'm like, but you're not me. Mm-hmm. And so if people ask me for advice, certainly I could say, you know, you might want to consider fill in the blank. But I totally agree with you on that front, Juji, in terms of giving advice to others. And I was going to say something else, but it flew out of my head. But Lee, you were going to say.
Doesn't that make you shut down? Because like this whole thing is about creating the space for other people to be vulnerable. And as soon as somebody starts to give you advice that feels like it's them telling you what to do, that puts up this wall, right? That wall that says like, ooh, that doesn't resonate with me at all. Like, what else are you going to say that makes me feel icky about my choices? You know?
Exactly. Right.
But yeah. And unless you're asked to be guided, you know, or to be given some kind of advice, yeah, people give too much advice that's too specific, but to such a different, you know, we're all different beings, like you said. And unless you're asking for it, you shouldn't be given it.
Even with your own kids, by the way, because I've read a lot of like parenting books and stuff, but no, it's true. At a certain point, obviously you have to tell a little kid what to do, but as they get older, they need to take the reins more and more, and they won't trust themselves. They won't be vulnerable with you as a parent, who's like one of the closest people in their lives, if you don't give them that space. And a lot of parents have that to learn, sometimes really the hard way.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Too many parents, I believe, enable and are still trying to do things for their kids once they become adults in a way that's really not serving them well. And when they are adults out there in the world, they're lost because mom and dad always did everything, or mom was always involved, or whatnot.
Yeah, I actually just remembered I was going to say before, if you don't mind. I was thinking about this next generation that's coming up in the world. And I think about just the communication styles in general of how young people, whether it's teenagers or early 20s, how they are going to be able to even understand the concept of creating space for others to be vulnerable. I'm just throwing that out there as a something to ponder. Like, what do you think about that?
You mean with all of that's happening with social media?
Yeah, just everything's a text, and like, how do
Yeah.
they get that
Yeah.
sense?
I mean, unless the words start to change, I mean, you can kind of spill your emotions in a text, just like you can in a letter or an email. But yeah, it's so different. It's so not intimate.
It's so not vulnerable. You can't be vulnerable over a text. I mean, you can, it's just not the same thing. And I'm not saying that everybody's going to have every conversation over text. I'm just saying that, oh, God, I just wish we could teach this stuff. I really do. In school.
At the same time, though, I feel like, yeah, we're giving social media kind of like a bad rap or whatever, but I feel like what it has done is, so many, like, just to use this as an example, is like, a lot of the time, like, people, like my friends who are gay would always tell me that like they were the only gay kid in school, and so they felt super lonely and isolated and shut off from the world. And they feel like this new generation at least has the support of, even if it's not a kid in their class, it's somebody sharing vulnerably on social media. They get to see that and not feel so alone, because they're like, oh, well, I've like never met another gay person before, and I feel like I'm the only person who's going through all of these things. All of a sudden they get to see, that being reflected back to them through social media. And there's a lot of vulnerability being shared on those platforms.
That's a good point. That's a
really
really
beautiful and really, really heartwarming. And that in and of itself makes people feel a lot less alone, even if it's not like the kid sitting next to them at school,
Right. Yep.
I bet social media, there's always, yin to the yang. So I bet social media has saved kids' lives just as much as they've destroyed their lives. And it's interesting because, you guys know I'm working on a curriculum to get into schools. And just this morning, we were working on a chapter, basically teaching practices and tools for how to be open to seeing something from somebody else's perspective. So like, there's a lot of people out there doing this work too, we might not be seeing it at the forefront, but it's happening behind the scenes for sure. Something that I wanted to add, if I can remember, because it was many thoughts ago. It was about asking powerful questions, which we had an episode about, and that topic comes up for me. I can't even tell you how many times a week, whether it's with myself and asking myself questions or asking other people questions. But as I'm getting older, I'm definitely finding, it's like almost like, I guess it's a little bit of, it's just me observing what makes me feel good, like in friendships. And I have some friends who like to give a lot of advice. And then I have friends who ask a lot of questions and just go about it in such a different, more non-judgmental way. And I'm feeling this like, I could feel myself just being pulled more, and it's, like attracting more of and wanting to be around more. And it feels good to be around the later. I had a conversation with a friend the other day, and I said, can I just vent to you? Excuse me. And I vented to her, and I just didn't know if she would say something that would make me feel a little better about the situation. And she said, can I ask you a question? Or she said, she didn't ask me a question. She said, can I tell you what's coming up for me? I said, yeah, please. And something she said, she's like, I'm hearing blank, blank, blank. And I swear those words shifted everything inside of me. And I was like, holy freaking crap. Like that was what I needed to hear. But my inner source, I just couldn't hear it. And so she was my messenger that day. So sometimes, you'll get these messages through others that come in the form of questions or just pointing something out. But I love in the space of like creating a vulnerable platform for people to be seen, to be heard, to speak openly. I think it's important to just ask questions. That way you don't assume anything, you don't jump to conclusions. So that was just really, really the question thing and the, can I share this? Or can I tell you what I'm hearing? Just all those little ways of, it's a question. And I think questions are really important.
I love that she asked if you are okay with her giving you some feedback. That right there also is it's respectful. And it's, and I think in many cases, people don't say no, but I think, we're having these conversations with certain people, like you would not have opened up as much with somebody who you would be like, no, I don't want your feedback, kind of a thing. And it's in such a nice, gentle way that it continues that comfortable platform for you to be heard.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Which I
Can you
love.
imagine we all walked around asking ourselves, how do I make this person feel safe?
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Or if we just naturally did it without even having to think about it.
Right.
That would be great.
Mm.
Yeah. Well, ladies, I think this is a good place to wrap up this conversation. If you've enjoyed our conversation, please subscribe to our channel and be sure to let us know if you have any topic requests or questions by commenting below. We'll see you soon, and thank you for watching.
Bye.